Hi there and welcome. I'm Rabbi Nachum Meth with the Las Vegas Kollel. The Chavetz Chaim, in the introduction to his book, talks about just how devastating a sin Lashon Hara actually is. And if I could just give an example, a lot of times we go ahead and we break a rule, but we don't realize, we don't appreciate just how significant that rule or that command actually was. So for example, let's say you are working in an office and you've got a report to file by a particular deadline, and you don't make the deadline. So we might not realize just how big of a corporate transgression that was. I was supposed to get it in by Monday at 1 o'clock and I only brought it in by Monday at 3 o'clock. So I missed the deadline. Is that a huge transgression? So I may not realize just how big or how significant of a transgression from the corporate perspective, how important was that report to my boss. If my boss tells me, he says, listen, if you don't get this report in at 1 o'clock, you're fired. It's critical. So now I appreciate just how important that report actually is. Oftentimes we don't realize, we don't appreciate the severity of a transgression because we just don't appreciate how important, how significant it is. The Chavetz Chaim tells us that when it comes to speaking Lashon Hara, when it comes to speaking negatively about one another, you'll find many passages in the Talmud that seem to be like extreme when it talks about just how severe a transgression it is. So for example, the Chavetz Chaim tells us, the Talmud tells us, Shegadol avon hazeh, just how serious this transgression is. Aj ein shir, there's no real valuation. We can't even evaluate how significant a transgression it is. The Talmud says, Hu kikofer be'ikr, if we speak Lashon Hara and we speak negatively, it's almost as if we're atheists denying God. We find the Talmud in the Yerushalmi tells us, Shenifraim min ha'adam avor ha'avon ba'olam hazeh, v'keren kayemes le'olam haba. When we speak negatively, God doesn't just punish us, He punishes us in this world and in the world to come as well. We get punished in both worlds. And the Chavetz Chaim tells us that he writes a book, Sefer Shmiras HaLashon, a different work where he talks about many passages in different sources that talk about just how significant the transgression of Lashon Hara is. And I think the reason, what the Chavetz Chaim is really highlighting is, we often, we know that Lashon Hara is negative. We know it's inappropriate. But by the Talmud comparing it to real egregious sins, a person who speaks Lashon Hara, a person who gossips, it's as if like you deny God. Well, that's an extreme sin. And I think what the Chavetz Chaim is telling us, he's highlighting we often don't appreciate the magnitude from God's perspective of just how important this mitzvah and this transgression actually is. Much like that example that we gave earlier. If you're an employee in an office and you're told, hey, get this assignment in on time, you might not appreciate how important meeting that deadline actually is. By God telling us, and the Talmud highlighting, that when we speak Lashon Hara, we get punished in this world and in the world to come. When we speak Lashon Hara, it's like denying God. What's happening is, it's highlighting, it's telling us, don't think this is a minor transgression. We might be tempted to think, it's like, all right, I missed the deadline. No. If we don't get this, if we don't get that report in on time, we're fired. If we go ahead and we speak Lashon Hara, recognize it's not a minor transgression, it's actually one of the most serious transgressions in the entire Torah.